Feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
We have started a series, we're calling it the Business Enhancement Special Series, where the whole goal of these episodes are to bring experts in certain fields and industries to the table to talk to them about relevant topics that can help you run a better, more effective, more efficient business, whether it's marketing, whether it's business succession, or today we're going to be talking about HR related matters. So you can find full replays of these broadcasts on our website at shrimptankpodcast.com/Central PA. If you're a podcaster, you can find us on pretty much every platform. Go to your favorite, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Google Play, iHeartRadio, search for the Central PA Shrimp Tank and click that follow button. You'll get updates automatically. And if you're on social, check us out on our Facebook page. If you're seeing this for the first time, please like the video, share it, go to our page, the Central PA Shrimp Tank, click that like and follow button so you can stay up to date on all of these episodes. And George, why don't we talk quickly about any updates that the Chamber has before we bring Karen in to discuss all things HR?
Well, thanks, Nathan. Just to let everyone know, HR closed here just a few minutes ago. So anything that we can say, definitely no problems with us here at the Chamber today. So that's a good thing.
Total immunity.
That's right. Total immunity. No issues. So Chamber continued to push us forward as Karen puts her fingers in her ear so as to not hear anything that we might be saying. We are looking to continue to support our small businesses, especially those restaurants, breweries, caterers that are obviously suffering at this time. So we had a great mixer here last week. We're able to give out some gift cards to some of those member restaurants. We'll be doing another one coming up here in March. Yes, we are getting ready to go into the month of March, which is absolutely tremendous, which means soon we'll be back outside playing golf and enjoying the beautiful weather. But now is an opportunity when we need to get out and support those restaurants, small businesses, your local shops, to really let them know that they are impactful in your community and that you want to support them. So feel free to go to our website. We'd love to have you come out, join our virtual mixer that's happening here in March. So we're going to be celebrating again, giving away some gift cards and providing people with an opportunity to get together, build those relationships yet again in a safe environment. And again, not having to worry about getting together in person quite yet, but we're going to get closer as the months get warmer, as we get a little bit farther on. We're looking forward to that. So
yeah. Awesome. I was a part of that last one that we did. The Shrimp Tank was one of the sponsors. And if you at home are watching and you have not participated in one of them yet, what an awesome opportunity to get to network with people. The Remo software that the Chamber now has, really, really cool tool for you to be able to bounce around between tables, see a ton of people. I mean, there's countless people that I was able to see and interact with. And I know, George, do you want to talk about for members, are there opportunities with the Remo software that members are able to possibly take advantage of?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have the software purchase here at the Chamber. And so if someone is looking to host a virtual event, we can help walk you through that. If you are a Chamber member, we'd love to walk you through what that looks like and how you can use that software to impact what you're looking to do in your business. You can feel free to reach out to me at the Chamber, george@wschamber.org. Shoot me a quick email and we'll be more than happy to discuss. If you're not a Chamber member, guess what? The time is right. You can come out and become a Chamber member and we can then have that conversation about it. So always opportunities, always looking for possibilities of helping our small business community. So come out and join us. We'd love to have you.
Awesome. Well, I want to give a shout out to the Chamber for being innovative, thinking really outside the box and being ahead of the curve and bringing this software to the table. I personally believe that this, even when we get back to normal, whatever that is, I think these are going to stay around for a while because instead of, for some things, instead of having to drive 20 or 30 minutes to get somewhere, spend an hour and a half there, another 20, 30 minutes home. You can do some of these from the comfort of your home and we'll be able to squeeze them in. So I think it's paving the way for some more hybrid networking opportunities in the future. So
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree.
Awesome. All right. Well, nobody wants to listen to us flap our gums anymore. What they came for is Karen Young to teach us all about the HR pitfalls, the things we need to be aware of today as we're in a interesting world with COVID, with work from home, with possibly getting into some minimum wage discussions. And so I'm going to take a step back, and Karen, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Why don't you give a brief background and introduction on yourself, on the company, what services you guys provide, and then we'll get into some of the specific questions.
Great. Nathan, thank you so much. And George, thank you. I appreciate you guys inviting me in and having me here in this circle with you to talk about small business, which is one of my passions as well. And I highly recommend and endorse the West Shore Chamber. If you're not involved, you should be. So anyway, HR resolutions, where did that come from? I have been in personnel and human resources for, I just like to say, a really long time. And I'll just leave it at that. I'm blessed. I'm one of the few that decided early in college that this was what I wanted to do. There was no such thing as a personnel major, or there wasn't even a minor in personnel. So I had to do business administration and psychology. Fell into my first personnel job actually through payroll just a couple years out of college. And here we are. Many years later, no, I'm not going to say how many. I will let you know, though, how, and I worked for big business for 20 years. Here, you guys will be able to do the math now. I worked for big business for 20 years, worked my way up through the organization, got to a position where I wasn't dealing with employees anymore, and I was miserable because I missed employees. So I worked my way down through organizations to where I could be back in the field. And I got really disillusioned with big business and corporate America, and I decided, the small guy needs HR help probably more than the bigger guy. Because we have people that they're great widget makers, and they want to do their own thing and be their own boss, but they probably don't know the first thing about HR. And I thought, what a cool idea. My husband and I talked about it. We gave ourselves 2 years. I could try it for 2 years. And here I am 16 years later. I have 2 HR managers and an HR coordinator working for me, and my husband retired from the company. So apparently that niche was a good niche.
Yeah. It sounds like it. Yeah. Awesome.
And we work with companies that are just too small to have the budget or the need for a full-time HR department. But they have employees, and every now and then there can be a challenge. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. So let's jump in to talk about something we briefly talked about it before the show, which is around handbooks. So we all know they're important. They're really necessary because they shape the framework of your organization's policies and procedures. Oftentimes, though, they can be a forgotten book that maybe was put together at one point in time, and it's been 10 years, and there's so much dust on it, it doesn't even look like it's a book anymore. So if organizations either don't have one, or maybe it's been a while since they've updated one, what are just some key things that really need to be in there that are really relevant, maybe in general, but then also now here looking in 2021 and beyond that we need to be aware of?
Absolutely, and great question. And I'm actually going to push back a little bit on the need for a handbook. Okay. A lot of that is really going to depend upon the size of your company. If you have a really, really small company, do you really need to invest the time, effort, energy, and budget into having a handbook, or do you just need a couple of policies that are applicable for the size of your company?
Sure.
And I'm going to use Pennsylvania companies as an example. In the state of Pennsylvania, until you are 4 employees, you have a couple regulations you need to be responsible for. But at 4 employees, you get into playing with the big boys and girls about discrimination and equal employment and all of that. So at under 4 employees, you should probably have some guidelines. Above 4 employees, you should probably start to think about it, but you would need to add some additional guidelines. So if you don't have a handbook, you want to add some additional guidelines or individual policies. I do recommend once you're over 10, you really need to have that guidebook. And I wish there was a better word for handbook, because it's not necessarily the rule book. It shouldn't be the rule book.
Right.
Sure.
I look at handbooks as an employee engagement tool. I want my employees to know what I expect of them.
Sure.
But I also want to provide them a document, a handbook, a guidebook that says, this is what I promise you. This is what I will do for you. and use it. A lot of marketers love me because I talk about it from an internal branding standpoint, and we want to be sure. So that's your first clue. If you change your strategic direction, or you change your marketing or your branding, I want you to look at your handbook also, because we don't want this old ugly logo hanging out there when we've got this new cool stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. The second thing, and this is why I encourage people to be cautious about their handbooks. Handbooks are a double-edged sword. They can help you, but they can hurt you as well. And they can hurt you pretty bad.
Yeah.
Right.
And here's how. If you have a policy in place that you don't follow anymore, and you actually take a negative employee, and it's always easy to talk about termination. So I'm going to terminate George because he violated.
Finally.
I know. Everybody's like, yay! The crowds are going wild. Love you, George. So I terminate George for a violation of our handbook. The policy very clearly states that if this is the first time he's done that, it's egregious enough that I can terminate him on the spot. Okay? And I do that. So George goes in front of unemployment or in front of a regulatory agency and says, I was fired for violating this policy, but, I always got away with this policy, which is in the same handbook. So which policies are true?
Yeah.
How did I know that I had to follow this policy? Because I knew I didn't have to follow this policy.
Right.
So, and I'm not an attorney.
And I'm guessing just because isn't a good answer.
Because I said so.
Yes. Now, we are, and again, I'm not an attorney, but Pennsylvania is an at-will state.
Sure.
So technically I could say just because.
Right.
But just because often leads to risk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
And the HR department should help you minimize your risk, or at least manage it.
Yeah.
If George comes to me and says, just because, my responsibility as an HR professional is to say, I hear you. Okay. Here's the risk you face by doing that.
Sure. Right.
If you want to take that risk because you're the business owner or you're the CEO, if you want to take that risk, that's your job, because we make risky decisions every day.
Right.
Yeah.
But I want you to know what your risk is so that you can make a better decision. You might decide, all right, just because he puts the toilet paper on the roll coming under instead of over, it's a pet peeve. I'll let it go this time, but I'm going to put a big note up in the bathroom.
It's more than a pet peeve. Or if you keep pushing the weakness button on the coffee maker, that's...
That could get you severely reprimanded.
No, wait, I got one, George. That's grounds for dismissal.
That's horrible. Why did you even go
sorry.
there?
Yeah.
So, all right, Karen, question then. And so thank you for even pointing out some of the maybe differences with what type of document you might need based on your size. Is there a general framework or guideline, if you will, for how often you should be revisiting these documents, whether your business has really changed or not?
Well, I'm going to say if a pandemic occurs, so you should take
So we may want to go and look at those documents.
You might want to take a look.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Because I'll bet you your work from home policy might possibly be out of date.
Correct.
Or non-existent.
Or non-existent. Yes, that is true. I usually recommend that you take a look at it. You look over it, you review it with your managers every year, just a top level. Okay, just a real top level. Refresh everybody's memory.
Yeah.
Okay. Talk about any incidents that have occurred in the last year.
Mm-hmm.
And I usually recommend a really thorough, deep dive every 2 to 3 years. Your handbook shouldn't really change that much.
Yep.
Now, procedures behind your handbook may change.
Yeah.
Right.
And a lot of things that we see with our small businesses is they're combining the two into one. A handbook, a policy, and procedure manual.
Sure. Gotcha. Yeah.
You run into some challenges there because I would accept your procedures I would expect them to expand, to develop, to pivot, if I can use the word of 2020. I don't expect your handbook to have to change that often.
Sure.
Yeah.
Employment regulations, in all honesty, when it comes right down to it, they don't change that often. It feels like they do, because a lot of times we're hearing things that are in front of, federal or state legislation.
Right.
Well, they're things that are being considered, the things that are being looked at, they're not necessarily going through.
Mm-hmm.
And if they do, send out an addendum.
Yeah.
Right.
Say section 3.1 of our handbook is no longer valid. Here's the addendum, instead of having to constantly update the handbook.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. But do make sure, if and when you update your handbook, get a new signature acknowledgement from the employees saying, I have received and understand that version 3.1 supersedes.
Sure.
Karen, would that be the same for, again, you're talking about small businesses, less than four employees who may have some best practices written down that they say, we would really appreciate it if you showed up for work on time and filled out your timesheet, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Would that be something as well that for those smaller groups and those really small businesses, they should be looking at that on a pretty regular basis as well, just to make sure that nothing substantial has changed or occurred? Is that a fair assessment?
It's not a bad assessment, George. I would encourage, and courageous conversations are always difficult. And I like to tell managers of any size organization, let's not create a policy because I have one employee who's not doing what I want them to do.
Right.
Happens, doesn't it, George?
Yeah, exactly right. Yep.
Because it's easier.
Yeah.
It's easier to write a policy that tells everybody don't do this.
Yeah.
Well, 3/4 of your employees are looking at you like, I don't do that. Why did you put out another policy? Oh my gosh, all we do, we're becoming big, we're becoming big business. They throw a policy out.
If Nathan would just listen, we wouldn't have this issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not happening.
But yes, and I would, it can be a document that you include with, when somebody first starts. Go over, here are the guidelines. Here are what we expect of you. What I really would like you to do, though, is start to incorporate that part back where here's what we'll do for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I'd like to see that regardless of under 4, over 10.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's a great document to use to really get your employees engaged in the work that they're doing.
Yep.
It can be a retention tool.
Well,
So you can use the handbook for more than just the rule book.
yeah. It's a very good point to bring up, though, making sure you as the either owner or manager of the organization knows what's in the handbook, because then what's expected of you as well, which could be a trap that you didn't realize was you set for yourself. So that's a great tip.
And Nathan, I promise you, if you as the business owner or the CEO are violating one of the policies, your employees know.
Yeah.
They may not say anything
Right. But
until
they
they
know.
need to.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Interesting.
Yeah. So if it's not a policy you're going to follow, leave it out in the handbook.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. So let's talk about, there's two, you mentioned work from home, and obviously that has been a result of some of the COVID related restrictions, but there's a whole other slew of challenges policies that COVID has presented. So maybe why don't we touch on those two areas on really what maybe from a policy standpoint, what we need to be thinking about or putting in place for both of those. Maybe let's start with COVID related stuff. So what do we need to have in there that protects, I guess I'll say everybody, protects the employer and protects the employee?
Absolutely. And I think the two actually go hand in hand. I'm making a little bit of a switch now where instead of talking about a COVID policy, I'm asking clients and people to take a look at a pandemic policy.
Right.
It's here to stay.
Sure.
Right.
All right.
Yep.
So we want to have policies that are in place that if we name just COVID, then what happens when the next one comes?
Right.
In
And it's
20 years
COVID.
when I'm retired.
Yeah.
Okay, in 20 years when I'm retired. It was a hard year in 2020 for HR people and for everybody else. I don't mean to diminish anybody else's pain from last year, but definitely take a look at what am I going to do? First of all, as a good business, what am I going to do to protect my business, my employees, my customers or clients?
Right.
Okay. What am I going to do? And maybe it doesn't even go in the handbook. Maybe there's a blurb in the handbook that says we have a procedure.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Right.
And then we spell out, even without bringing in regulatory agencies, what are we going to do? What is our plan? Just like in some of you may be too young to remember this, but in the grand year of
Not George, by the way.
31st, 1999. What's your computer emergency plan? I know, I was there too.
Right.
I laughed at the whole thing when nothing happened.
Yeah.
But it was important to have a plan.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's your plan?
Right.
Okay. This has happened. We've had to drop kick, and just we've had to survive. What's our plan in the future? How are we going to take care of our business? Because if we don't have our business, we don't have customers and we don't have employees.
Sure.
So how are we, and we need all three, you need that whole mix. So how are we going to take that?
Yeah.
So make your decisions about that.
Yeah.
Then, what are my regulatory requirements? And I will fall back on COVID now because we had the Family First Corona Response Virus Act, or Coronavirus Response, FFCRA. HR people love initials. I am so thankful that our country said, you, Miss Employer, need to pay your people if they get sick. I understand you can't necessarily afford to do that. So here's how I'm going to help you.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That was, in hindsight, one of the best things professionally that I've seen happen from a regulatory standpoint.
Right.
And I know there are people out there that will disagree with that, and I respect that. But as an HR professional, that was great.
Mm-hmm.
But then the challenge becomes that goes away. That went away. The mandate went away 12/31, 2020, but COVID didn't go away.
Right.
So we had that next blessing where if you want to implement a voluntary plan along the same lines, you may take advantage of those same tax breaks.
Right.
Great.
Right.
We're coming up on March 31st when that one expires.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I haven't heard any talk about any of that being extended. So as business owners, we now need to start to think, what are we going to do for our employees?
Right.
We are not required in Pennsylvania, we are not required by law to pay our employees for missed time. But remember I said talk about protecting your business.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want a COVID positive employee coming to work because that's going to impact the coworkers and my customers or clients.
Right.
So what do I do for them? You know, am I able to do anything? And if you're not, you're not. But I think it will be important to have that conversation with your employees ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't afford to do this. Here's
Sure.
why.
Right.
But this is what I want to do. So
Yep.
plan, be ready. You know, I'd like to think that they were thinking that the vaccine was going to be out and life was going to be good by March 31st. So I don't know. Are they going to extend that tax credit? I don't know.
Right.
Sure.
Fingers crossed that they do, because I think that is a great boon for small employers
Right.
to enable to do what they all, in my conversations with the people, have all considered the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it presents a unique situation because the small business has the ability to implement some of those kind of things where a large corporation may not be able to do those things.
Yeah.
And so taking care of your business and your employees becomes paramount
Mhm.
for your success or failure moving forward.
Right?
Mhm.
So yeah, I think it's a very unique situation that small businesses are put in And it may hopefully will benefit them that they can figure that out and be a little more nimble than some of the larger corporations may be able to do. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
with the larger corporations, yes, it's painful to have your staff out, but I'm going to use an example. I have 4 employees. If I lose one for a
Yep.
14-day quarantine, I have lost 25% of my service capacity.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So when
Yep.
you look at those numbers and you look at it that way,
Mhm.
Right.
I mean, that's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
so, and then moving on from that, we also have to look at these work from home policies.
Yeah.
And if anything positive, can't believe I said this, came out of this thing, and I'm going to use a client as an example without naming names. I had a client that was, I mean, I'm talking, you had to select your work hours. You worked 7:30 to 4:30. I'm sorry, 7:30 to 4, 8 to 4:30, or 8:30 to 5. You picked it when you started working there, and you came to the office.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
I don't care. You came to the office.
Right.
And this came around, and it is one of, I am very proud of how well they transitioned. They did not miss a beat. They sent everybody home with their equipment, and they said it'll be for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay, that's funny now. We were like, oh, 2 weeks. Yeah, we can survive this.
Mhm.
Yeah. Anyway, they have completely turned around. We have already updated the policy that when we go back to the office, you don't have to go back to the office.
Wow.
You don't have to.
Right.
Unless there is some type of a meeting in which you are physically required to be present,
Yeah.
you don't have to work out of the office anymore. To see that complete turnaround
hmm
was fabulous. I think the challenge that we're going to have as small employers and large employers, when we do get the go back to the office, we're going to have challenges getting some people back to the office.
Right.
So my
So-
question to employers is going to be, do they really have to come back to the office? Come on. You
Right.
survived a year with them working from home.
Right.
Give me the business case for having them sitting in a cubicle.
So
And
is
there might be one.
Yeah. Will that be kind of the, we'll call it the litmus test, if you will, of if I have an organization that I want my employees to come back in the office, I'm old school, and I just want them to be there, and they don't want to come back, who wins? Whose rights are preferred in that scenario?
Yeah. I think the employer will win out by being able to require it as an essential function of the job. If the employer believes that it is essential to be at the office, in
Right.
that cubicle, in that office, at that a front desk receptionist.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure. Right. But short of that, it sounds like the employee will have more power to essentially refuse that if they didn't really want to come back, or it wasn't necessary for the organization to survive for them to do that. Is that a fair assessment?
I think the employee could potentially end up losing their job.
Yeah. Okay.
And I would hope that it would never come to that. I
Right.
am literally going to, if any of my clients say they have to come back, even if it's to play devil's advocate, I'm going to say, tell me why.
Right.
We
Sure.
understand.
Okay.
And then if they say yes, I mean, as HR, my responsibility is to support the decisions of the organization. But it's
Right.
also my responsibility to challenge those decisions in an appropriate manner, not in
Sure.
front of the entire staff, but
Sure.
in an appropriate manner, and ask those questions.
Yeah.
Tell me why. Why do they have to go back? Or maybe it is, okay, you have to go back, but if you have a doctor's appointment today, I don't want you to commute an hour and then have to commute an hour back for an hour at the doctor's office and then come back. Why don't you work from home that day?
Right.
As an employer, I lose less productivity from that person that way.
Sure.
Right.
because it's quicker and easier for them to get to and from whatever that appointment is.
Sure.
I really hope we see an advanced hybrid of office work. Some employees have to go back. They're social beings.
Yeah.
Their houses aren't set up. We, as employers, have invaded their personal space. We have invaded their life.
Hmm.
We didn't really give them an option on it, did we?
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
Well-
some employees don't. I have the advantage. I have a spare bedroom. We
We could
already
debate.
have
We could
an
debate who
office.
made that choice for us.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I won't.
We may
I'm
or
not-
may not want to get into those specific views on this particular episode. Maybe
I'm
for-
not going to name any animals, but
Oh no.
yeah. But you're right. So ultimately, though, what you're saying is there's not yet, and maybe this would change, but there's not necessarily yet any legal protection for an employee should they just want to put their foot down if an employer says they want them to come back into the office. However, there is an element for the employer that says if it's not necessary, which is to your point about asking the question, and one of your goals is just looking at, is it necessary? And if I want to create a workforce that is excited to continue to work for us, that wants to continue to push our mission and our vision forward, that maybe that's a policy I need to entertain, because even though I don't have to by law, it's likely going to provide for a more satisfied workforce, and a workforce is going to want to stay longer.
Employment culture. And I'm with it. I completely understand collaboration and how it is important to be able to, in the moment, walk to somebody's desk or somebody's office and say, George, what do you think about this?
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Get it.
Exactly.
100%. I
Yeah.
really do.
Yeah.
I
know.
talk more to my staff now, and we sold our office building September of 2018. So we went virtual before it was cool to be virtual.
Yeah.
I talk to my staff more now via Teams
Mhm.
than we did when we were in the same physical space.
Yeah.
Do I miss seeing them? 100%.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one thing I've noticed personally in our organization is we do communicate. It seems to be a lot more in some regards, although one thing we've all noticed, so we miss seeing each other face to face. That for a while, we're back in the office, so that's we still see each other every once in a while. But what I have noticed is there's just a lot of distractions at the office too. So we may be chatting on Teams and we may be interacting a lot and getting stuff done, but it's not a, hey, I've got a 2-second question I got to ask Nathan that turns into a 10-minute conversation.
Right.
So there's elements of that are really great, but we've also looked back and realized, yeah, we can get a lot more done as well when we're at home or when we're interacting that way. So I think to your point about this more blended hybrid environment where, yeah, maybe it's a day or two a week where you're able to all be together, but then everybody else is at home, off days, and it's blending that culture with efficiency. But at this point, there's no, that's all, did you call it employment culture? Is that how?
The culture of the organization.
Yeah. So that's really all it is at this point, because there's no real protections or parameters out there legally for any of that, correct?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
And we might have a couple attorneys jump in and send me scathing notes about that. But there are none that I can think of, outside of the regular, protections. I mean, if somebody says, I can't come into the office anymore because I became disabled while we were.
Sure. Yeah. Right. But that has nothing to do with inherently work from home, or what that has something to do with something different.
Correct. Yeah.
Interesting.
So, yeah. But I would definitely, I would be taking a look at my pandemic or serious national crises.
Yeah.
I mean, because it can go beyond a pandemic. I mean, so maybe the policy is national crises.
Yeah.
What do I want to do?
I mean, I'm fortunate to be part of the Vistage organization. I don't know if you're familiar with Vistage, but I'm in one of the local chapters. And before I officially had joined, I know a lot of the coaches and chairs in the area had been talking about, and it was before COVID had started, although there were rumblings of what's going on over in China and whatnot, but they had started to push the idea of just in general, disaster type policy. Because, all right, you said a pandemic policy. You could broaden that to just crisis. What if your building catches fire? What if your building burns down? What if you have a flood? What if you have, and because that has the ability to also displace people. There's maybe a different issue because you may have lost documentation or things like that. But being broader about it, I think is very good, a very good piece of advice, and not just saying, well, we need a COVID policy. No, you may need pieces that are relevant to COVID, but you need a broader policy that can be broadly applicable.
Yeah. Look back to Katrina.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's this little place right down the river called 3 Mile Island that may have affected people at one point. I don't know. Maybe not.
I would date myself if I say how it impacted me. So
Yeah. I mean, there are a number of things that could, as you said, be part of that disaster, whether that's natural, unnatural, whatever it may be, that needs to be thought about in that broader scope.
Yeah.
And the thing that fascinates me about that, and looking at it from that standpoint, I mean, it's human nature to say that's not going to happen to me. Katrina isn't going to happen in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, in central Pennsylvania.
Right.
Guess what? This has happened to us.
Right. Exactly.
Now it is time to take a look at what disaster policies do I have in place.
Yeah.
Very true.
Yeah.
My insurance tells me I'm supposed to have a computer disaster policy written. Every year when I do my renewal, I go, yeah, I need to do that.
Uh-huh.
Oh man, knock on wood.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good stuff so far. All right. One kind of final thing, maybe to just, and I don't know if this is a good way to ask this question, but is there anything right now that is from a topic standpoint that we haven't talked about that business owners or managers need to be looking at within their handbook that's definitely hot button or is something that needs to be reviewed?
Yeah. Within your handbook, I think you really need to take a look. If you have and this would be for anybody's handbook, I don't care, regardless of size. If you have a disciplinary process, I want you to look at that, and I want you to make sure you're following that.
Right.
I want you to make sure it's broad enough that you are not locked into, I must do, excuse me, A, B, C.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I also want you to read all of your policies from that standpoint as well. What does this lock me into doing? And follow that up with, if my best employee, if my superstar salesperson, if my best,
George Bush
CEO violates this, am I prepared to fire them?
Right.
And if your answer is no, modify the policy or get the policy out of the handbook, because except in very few circumstances, I mean, a CEO probably reports to a board of directors, and there would be more involved to exiting them from the organization. But read your handbook that way. The second thing I'm going to challenge you with is read your handbook through an employee's eyes. Put your employee hat on.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. What is this handbook telling me as an employee? Is this someplace I want to work?
Yeah.
If it's not someplace you would want to work as an employee, take a look at how you can change that. How can you soften that? How can you adapt that? How can you bring your culture or the culture that you want to develop into that handbook?
Sure.
Yeah. That's fantastic.
Yes.
Two great pieces of advice.
Thank you.
This is an always changing topic, so I can envision us being on an episode again here in the maybe near future or not too distant future to talk about new trends that are going on. But it's safe to assume you are open for business. But if there are individuals that have tuned in here that have heard everything you've said and they say, you know what, we need some guidance on X, Y, or Z, or we need Karen and her team in our corner to be able to help us with our policies, what's the best way for people to maybe reach out and find out more about your organization and how they could get in contact with you?
Great question. Best thing to do is go to dramafreehr.com. That takes you to a landing page on our website, which will get you some free stuff.
Cool.
I know, free stuff is cool.
Yeah.
Or if you can remember this, Karen at hrresolutions.com.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, Karen, thanks for taking some time out of your afternoon to come out here and provide us some really, I think, timely but knowledge and pieces of information. There's a couple key takeaways that I gathered from that. One, it's pull out that handbook if you have it, or if you don't, and you're in maybe that range where you maybe don't need a full-blown handbook. Whatever it is that you've got, pull that out, review it, make sure that what's in there are still relevant to your organization, particularly as it pertains to what you're expected of as an organization, and that you're still able to or willing to provide that, and that you are providing that.
Mm-hmm.
The second key thing is the last thing I think you mentioned, your disciplinary policy.
Yeah.
I think that's having a good handle on that, making sure that that's crystal clear are two really great takeaways. So Karen, thank you so much. Everybody at home. Well, let me give you an opportunity to, I didn't want to cut you off. So was there any final words you wanted to say?
I just want to thank you for having me here. And I do want to say it's not that scary. Have courageous conversations, use your best judgment, and you'll get through it.
Yeah. That's a great way to end it. So thanks so much, George. Always a pleasure being alongside you here on these episodes. Thanks for your wisdom. Thanks again for everything you're doing at the Chamber to help the community right here in Central PA. Everybody at home, I hope you found value in this. We're going to keep bringing these to you every month. Again, trying to bring relevant content to you on how to run a better business, how to run a more effective business, and ultimately have a better life. So we'll see you on the next episode of the Central PA Shrimp Tank. Thanks.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond, and the